What if changing your life didn't begin with action, but with imagination? Not wishful thinking, not woo woo fantasy, but actual intentional visualization, something your brain can't always distinguish from reality. Today, we're looking at the science behind that. Welcome to the HAUS Hub Podcast, your go to space where design, cognitive sciences, well being, and business come together. I'm your host, Monica Costa, and today you're tuning into Well-Being Capsule, where we slow down, reconnect, and explore science-backed insights to support your everyday life. This podcast is powered by HAUSens, born from its mission to guide designers in creating spaces for well-being, grounded in cognitive science. Let's dive in. Let me take you back to last year when I first started playing with visualization. And I say playing because it actually started as curiosity. Could I change how I felt or how I moved through the day just by imagining things differently? Could I hold the vision in my mind long enough that it became easier to believe in? At the time, I was trying to find out more rhythm, more clarity, both in my work and in my inner life. And what I found was something very simple, but also very powerful. When I visualized with intention, things actually changed. It took me time and consistency, also intention and me believing in it. So it didn't happen instantly because honestly, it takes some time to go against everything that you believe to be true. But something inside me started organizing itself around that vision, especially when I started looking for evidence proving that I was spending my time and energy on something that made sense and that was really going somewhere. Because it turns out that neuroscience explains exactly why that happens. Visualization, in the most basic sense, is the mental practice of creating images and scenarios in your mind. You can visualize anything you want to happen in your life: a moment of calm, a project going well, a conversation unfolding smoothly, or even your future self thriving in a life you're still working towards. But here's the thing, because if there's one thing that I love about visualization, is that your mind doesn't know the difference between imagination and reality. And when you visualize with detail and repetition, your brain starts to respond as if whatever it is that you're imagining is already part of your lived experience. That's what makes this so worth exploring, not just as a feel good habit, which it definitely is, but as a tool for rewiring the brain. Now, how does the visualization affect us? Well, let me tell you, visualization is far from a passive experience. When we hold an image in our minds with clarity and intention, whether it's a future version of ourselves, a task we're preparing for, or even a scene that evokes calm, our brain responds with surprising complexity. Studies like the one led by Liu and colleagues in 2021, published in Brain Structure and Function, used brain imaging and showed how our brain activates the high level brain regions, so the hubs involved in focus, planning, memory, and decision making when we visualize. So, things like imagining stepping on a stage or finishing a project, your brain doesn't just sit back and daydream. It's actively firing up systems it would use in real life to carry out that action. That's fascinating. In other words, when you engage in vivid mental imagery, you're accessing the same networks you would when actively performing those tasks. This is something that Stephen Kosling, a pioneer in this field, pointed out as early as 1980s. He demonstrated that visual imagery and actual visual perception share overlapping neural pathways. In other words, your brain doesn't totally distinguish between something you're seeing with your eyes in real life and something you're imagining with clarity and intention. This has been especially well documented in elite sports. Research shows that athletes who visualize their routines using visual and kinesthetic imagery or advanced tools like virtual reality see improvements in performance, motivation, coordination, and cognitive precision. Now, the effectiveness often depends on the sport, the athlete's experience, and the style of visualization. And I'll talk about that in a minute, but take this example. When a gymnast rehearses a routine in their mind, or a speaker runs through a talk in their imagination, they're engaging neural circuits in a way that strengthens the readiness of the brain. They're training the mind to respond with more ease, more familiarity, and more confidence when the real moment arrives. And from my perspective, this kind of training shouldn't be reserved for high performers. Our brains all operate on the same principles. So, visualization is a tool that anyone can use. It helps us pre experience our predicted future so we can then meet those moments with more clarity and readiness when they do come. Now, let me tell you what I find really interesting about visualization. It does not just light up your brain while you're doing it. It can actually change how your brain is wired over time, depending on what you imagine and how often. One of the most compelling studies in this space comes from Ribbit and colleagues in 2021. This research showed that even internal experiences like mental imagery, what you see in your mind's eye, can lead to structural shifts in the brain. This happens through a process called synaptic plasticity, which is essentially the brain's ability to strengthen the connections between neurons through repeated, meaningful use. In neuroscience, this kind of strengthening is known as long term potentiation, or LTP. It's the foundation of how habits take root, how learning becomes lasting, and how mental practice becomes embodied change. The more vividly and emotionally you visualize something, whether it's a goal, a future version of yourself, or even just a sense of calm, the more those neural circuits get reinforced. Your brain starts laying down a kind of pathway that says, I think this matters. This is familiar. So I'll make it easier to access it next time. This means that in a very real and literal sense, your brain is adapting to what you mentally rehearse, not in theory, but biologically. With enough repetition, those neural pathways become more familiar and more accessible. The mindset, the behavior, the emotion you're calling in, they start to feel natural because your brain has already practiced the route. It already knows how to get there. Now, something really important to mention here is that the brain responds to different visualization strategies in different ways because not all of them feel the same and not all of them are equally effective for everyone. Studies using EEG technology, like the one by Anderson and colleagues in 2011, have shown that depending on what and how you're visualizing, the brain can experience very different levels of cognitive load. Some imagery activates the brain in a way that feels energizing and focused because it helps create clarity, but other types, especially when they're overly complex or emotionally disconnected, which can happen, can feel mentally overwhelming. It's like your brain doesn't know where to anchor the image that you're giving it, so it works harder, and that strain can then get in the way of the benefits that you can get. And trust me, I know because this is something I felt when I started practicing visualization in my own life. I quickly realized that trying to manifest a whole new reality overnight wasn't going to work for me. It felt abstract and forced. So I simplified. Instead of picturing everything I wanted to change at the same time, I just focused on one thing, a feeling I wanted more of, a small moment I could return to, a simple scene that evoked calm or clarity. And by that, over and over, those emotional cues became easier to find. They became places my mind knew how to return to. Not because I pushed it or forced them, but because I had already rehearsed them gently over time and with intention. So here's your challenge of the week. Create a 3 minutes daily visualization ritual. I will give you 3 steps. The first one is choose a moment or habit, or even a feeling that you want to grow into. I suggest you start with something small like feeling grounded when you open your laptop, or feeling confident before a meeting. Step number 2, close your eyes and build a sensory rich image. What does it smell like? What do you see? What can you hear? How does your body feel in that moment? Believe me, the more senses you bring into this experience of visualization, the better. And then step number 3 is breathe slowly and let the scene unfold in your mind. No pressure, no performance. Just watch it happen as if it's already real. The goal here is not to achieve something specifically as soon as possible. It's to rehearse safety, confidence, and alignment so that your brain can build trust in the path that you're walking. The more you do this with intention, the more common this pathway will become, and the faster you live it as second nature. If there's one thing I want you to stay with, is that so much of what we believe needs to happen out there actually begins in here. Visualization is very powerful, but it's not a replacement for action. It's what prepares the mind to take it. It's a way of showing your brain what matters, what's possible, and what to prepare for. And with consistency, it can become a practice of quiet self leadership. If this episode opened something up for you, I'd love you to share this with someone who might be ready to see their mind as part of their personal design process too. Remember to hit the like and follow button to keep the conversation going every Tuesday. And as always, thank you for being here. Stay well, stay curious, and keep designing your life with intention. See you next time.